This is Sally Culberson, who has lived in Singapore for a number of years. She would like to share her experiences of being an expatriate mother. So Sally, can you give us a brief history of your expatriate experience?
Originally we're from Melbourne, Australia, and we moved to Singapore 9 years ago. We moved over with a 2-year-old and we had one son here in Singapore, and we've lived both in Singapore and Taiwan.
So what were your experiences of living in both Singapore and Taiwan in terms of raising children?
I think initially the conversation within the family when the boys were little is that we are Australian and that we have our own culture and we raise them with experiences and celebrations as we would when we were young as Australians. And as they got older and they started going to school, they were exposed to other cultures, other children's backgrounds. They learned a lot of multicultural things about the world, learned about all other children's backgrounds, experiences, celebrations, cultures. And when that was happening, I found when they were little, around 4, 5, 6 and 7, they had a slight confusion over what nationality they were and what culture they actually belonged to.
So just unpacking that a little bit. So when they were overseas, did you still follow Australian customs and different celebrations and cultural days with your children?
We did, and we spoke about it. We kept in contact with our family at home. I think also my husband and I we're quite multicultural as well. So we didn't bring home the fact that we are Australian. It was always just within conversation, we come from Australia, but we definitely celebrated Australia Day and celebrated in the way we would when we were in Australia.
So what do you think some of the main challenges were for your children in terms of growing up overseas?
I think one of the main challenges for the eldest one, he had 2 years experience of life back in Australia. He was really connected to Australia, our family in Australia and the lifestyle. So he's spent the last 9 years talking about how he wants to get back home. He has a really strong Australian identity. He feels that Australia suits his personality and that Asia doesn't. And so that's something we've had to manage with him, that we're just having an experience, and when he's older he'll return back to his country because he has a strong tie to it. The other son that we had in Asia, in Singapore, doesn't have the same, or didn't have the same affinity with Australia. He actually considered himself Singaporean. At one stage he also told people that he was British and that he was born in Manchester, and he sees himself as not so Australian but other nationalities that he identified with himself at that point of time within his friendship groups or within whatever country we were living in.
So at the moment your 2 boys go to an international school. Do you think that is beneficial or detrimental to them being third culture children?
They both go to the Australian International School. So they both enjoy the fact they go to an Australian school, but the curriculum's PYP, so it's very multicultural. So they do learn about Australian specific things, but I think that's toned down as the curriculum's grown and the schools become more international. And I think it's now just an international learning experience, to be honest.
Do your children have many local friends, as in Singaporean friends or contacts?
No, they don't have many local friends, but they do have friends from every nationality. And what's interesting is they don't really talk about their friend's nationality. That's quite accepted. They may say the mum's from Rome or Rio or Japan, but they tend to not label their friends as far as nationality. They all say they go to the Australian school. So they definitely see multiculturalism as something that's not significant and doesn't need a label.
And growing up in Singapore and Taiwan, do your children take part in Singapore-specific cultural days or celebrations, such as Chinese New Year and so forth?
We don't do it as a family, but they definitely experience that through the education system and the learnings at school.
And when they are at home during those seasons of festivities, do they want to take part at home in any of those activities, you know, to have a special meal for Chinese New Year or what have you at home?
They tend not to want to celebrate it, but they're very, very keen on sharing their knowledge of what's happening and their understandings about different celebrations, religious as well as cultural.
So you talked a little bit about curriculum, but what other challenges do you think there are for third culture children?
I think it was interesting when we went to Taiwan. My son, the little one, was the only Caucasian across 4 classes and the only native English speaker. And he started to come home at 4, very confused that the other children that were Asian expats to that region of Taiwan, that they didn't accept the fact that he felt he was Singaporean. Yet he was born in Singapore and had only been to Australia 3 or 4 times. So his identity was his identity was that he was Singaporean. He was born here, raised here. But the other children who from an Asian culture didn't, and their parents didn't accept that Noah was Singaporean because he didn't have a second language in Chinese, Mandarin. So that was very actually upsetting to him because it was the first time he couldn't understand why he wasn't Singaporean. And I do remember he asked if he could dye his hair black because he's blonde, so that because black hair is better than golden hair because I need to be Singaporean and they don't believe that I am.
In terms of cultural references such as flags and anthems, I guess at the Australian school, do your children know the Singapore national anthem or in other ways the Australian national anthem?
The boys have been exposed and know numerous countries' flags, so wherever we are, they can identify most flags in the world, and they have a strong understanding of many countries' anthems.
And in terms of identity, right now, if you ask your children, you know, what they were or where they're from, what do you think they would say?
Now, as they've got older and they have more of an understanding about migration, immigration, expat life, at 11 and 8, they will both say they're Australian.
Yeah. Do they spend large amounts of time in Australia?
No. They probably go once a year.
And for once a year, how many weeks would that be?
Probably 4.
4 weeks. Okay. Are there any other points you'd like to add about your experiences, or?
I think that third culture kids, when they're younger, they go through potentially a period of who am I, where am I, and who am I, and as they get older and they learn more about different cultures and family histories, they tend to form their own identity, whether that be back of their birth country or their parents' birth country. They will actually choose what culture they are part of.
Okay, thank you, Sally.
Thank you.